What's up, everybody? From Nautilus, I'm Brian Gallagher, and you're watching Behind the Scenes. Today I'm speaking with Elena Renken. Elena is a science writer based in New York. She is a former editor in chief of the Brown Daily Herald at Brown University, where she earned a bachelor's degree in science, technology, and society. And she's made videos for places like PBS Nova. Elena is joining us today to talk about her recent story in Nautilus titled How the Brain Allows the Deaf to Experience Music. Our sensory systems for hearing and touch overlap to stir a wealth of emotions. Elena, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So before we dive into your piece a little bit, do you want to give us a brief background on your history as a science writer? How did you get interested in writing about science?
I actually originally got interested in reading and writing about science when I figured out as a kid that I have synesthesia. So this got me really interested in the neuroscience of the brain because it turns out that I actually see colors associated with letters and numbers and words, which got me really into reading about that disorder and the condition and what we do and don't know about it. So after that, I found I was especially fascinated by all the intricacies of the brain and started doing a lot of reading and loved talking to researchers about it.
That's fascinating. I think we'll have to return to that. But before we do you want to give our viewers a brief summary of the piece you wrote for us, just in case they haven't read it yet?
Absolutely. I was really lucky to report this piece for Nautilus, and it came out of the simple idea that we can actually experience music not just through our ears. So the sound waves that I think a lot of us assume we would only hear through our ears can also be picked up by other sensors in the body, especially ones called Pacinian corpuscles. And these are scattered throughout the body, but there are especially a lot of them gathered in your hands and your feet. And like your inner ear, they can sense really tiny disturbances in energy that come in the form of acoustic waves. So this means that even if people don't have ears that are able to pick up music, they can pick up a lot of the features of music through vibrations that they feel in their body. They can pick up not just obvious things like beats and rhythms, but they can actually also pick up whole different frequencies that give a sense of pitch, so they can construct whole melodies and feel those in their bodies. And researchers are now looking into even more complex ways they can experience music, say whether there's dissonance in certain combinations of vibrations, whether there are octaves, and how much emotion you can get through these vibrations. So I looked into some of the technology that researchers are working on and the nuances it's bringing, especially to people who are hard of hearing or deaf and may not be able to fully appreciate music as it is.
That's super cool. And like I said, if you haven't read that story yet, stop watching and go check that out. But I want to ask you now, what got you interested in writing the story?
This actually came out of a conversation with my editor at Nautilus, Kristen, who had mentioned this concept of hearing music even better through the addition of vibrations. So I knew a little bit about the sensors involved in the body, and I started reading up on this, reading different people's accounts of their experiences of music with different levels of hearing and different kinds of technology, what was available and what people used. And I started to find these accounts of newer research projects that were trying to add complexity and intricacy to these experiences. So that's how I started building the story.
What were some of your first thoughts on how to go about reporting it?
One of my first thoughts was that I wanted to be really careful to make sure that I wasn't just saying these technologies were fixing a problem. I think it's especially amazing to see how these new technologies and these new pieces of research can open up the experience of music for people with all kinds of different sensory experiences, and that they also might be really amazing to try out for people who have full hearing and had never considered them before. It can be a really immersive experience. So I wanted to make sure to incorporate that perspective that our sense of music actually is a lot more amazing and intricate and widespread in the body than we had thought, and that it adds all these options. So this new research I've focused on a variety of projects can actually add some different pathways through which people can have an even more enriched experience of music, not just filling a hole for those who can't necessarily hear it through their ears.
Are there any bits of the story that you put in while drafting but ended up taking out for whatever reason that are interesting and some reviewers would like to hear about?
I actually found a lot of little nuggets of really interesting information as I was reporting the story that I would have loved to include, but I couldn't, just keep writing on and on. So, one of those is about the history of devices that translate speech through vibrations. There's a whole really fascinating backstory to how that evolved because there was a lot of research looking into how we could convey the nuances of speech to people who are hard of hearing or deaf, but a lot of that actually got tamped down and the momentum ran out as cochlear implant technology improved. So, one of the researchers I was talking to me explained that part of his goal was just to see how we could use this vibration based technology to supplement experiences of sounds, to add on to what we already get from hearing aids and cochlear implants, that it doesn't have to be one or the other, and that this resurgence of interest in these particular kinds of sensations from vibrations can really add on to that. But there are a few others as well. One thing that I would have loved to put into the story is the whole notion of deaf raves. There's actually an organization called Deaf Raves in the United Kingdom that works to organize these whole experiences that are very inclusive. They want to make sure that people who are deaf or hard of hearing have a place where they can go to make experiencing music, and especially rave music, a whole part of their culture. So they organize huge events that draw people in to both make music and experience it through vibrations and whatever avenues are available to them. And then one last thing that I found really interesting actually was that some of the research into the really intricate ways that we hear sound and the ways we experience vibration show really complicated but fascinating overlap. It turns out that actually, if you're playing a sound and you translate that frequency to a vibration that you're playing, and you increase the intensity of that vibration, like you might increase the volume of the sound, that certain neurons in your brain that pick up on it actually shift their sensitivity. So they become sensitive to a slightly different frequency. So it's really interesting for me to uncover the different ways in which those systems overlap and are similar to one another. Some of the researchers I've talked to, as I mentioned in the story, actually think that they might have evolutionarily come from the same place, or that our sensitivities to vibration might actually have evolved first in simpler animals.
That's fascinating. Do you want to say anything about how your experience of music might be shaped at all uniquely by your synesthesia?
So my synesthesia is actually visual, but there are a lot of people
Okay.
who, when they experience music, they see all sorts of colors swirling around them, or they might have a different sense of smell or a different sense of touch, actually. Synesthesia is any kind of cross wiring in the brain. So mine doesn't particularly affect my sense of music, but the lyrics actually have strong colors for me. So a song title might be green or something like that, which adds a whole nother dimension. And I felt made me especially open to hearing these kinds of experiences from people who experience these senses in different ways.
That's super interesting. Is there something about the semantics of a song title that will determine what color it is to you, or how does that? Have you done a lot of like self investigation as to like how that the phenomenon impacts you?
I've done some. So the color is actually based on the specific letters. So, say my name is Elena, that's blue mostly because E is blue, but I can look at the specific letters and see each of their colors. So, L is kind of a cream color. So, mostly it comes through the combination of those colors, which some are stronger than others, and they mix together to see whole words in different colors.
So, what is reading a book like? This is kind of interesting to think about for you. I mean, you must be seeing a bunch of colors based off of what you just said, right?
I am, yes. Each letter, but each word, especially if you're going fast, has a particular color. So there's a whole added sense that goes into reading or experiencing words and numbers.
When did you find out that this was not something that the other people were experiencing, or the other kids? Like, how early was it, and what was that like to realize that you had this ability or condition, or however you want to describe it?
I remember figuring out around eighth grade that not everyone saw these colors. It's really automatic, actually. It's just like breathing. So it's not something I was going around telling people about when I was a little kid because it just seemed so natural to me. But I do remember as a little kid, it was really important to me that my French binder be the right color of blue to match with the word and all these things that showed it had always been there. It had to be purple for geography and red for math. It simply had to. But I figured this out
Wow.
during class in eighth grade because I remember that someone misread my handwriting and I couldn't understand how they could think it was a different word when it was such a different color. And I remember I just started to read more and more about it and different people's accounts and what the science had to say about it at that point.
Wow, that's super cool. So are you in touch at all with how developed the research is on synesthesia? I imagine you might be more familiar with it than most people, given that you said it got you interested in science and science writing in college. Yeah, I mean, what was that like? Did you have a lot of interesting conversations with scientists in connection to that?
It got me really interested in talking to scientists and especially learning more and more from neuroscientists. But I actually haven't done a lot of writing about synesthesia. I do try to keep up sometimes with the research, and I am impressed that though there are some theories, it seems like we really don't quite know the direct mechanism in the brain that causes it. It's still kind of mysterious. But it sounds like we do know that it's a lot more common than we once thought to have some sort of cross wiring of the senses, whether that's with colors or with music or with any of the senses you experience.
Have you taken the initiative of seeing how your synesthesia might interact with psychedelics?
You
Is that
have
something you've ever
not.
tried, or have ever thought of trying?
I have not, but I would be very curious. I have read that some psychedelics do induce synesthesia in one form or another, but I can't say I've experienced it personally.
Um, what are you working on at the moment? What
Um,
other stories
at the
you got
moment,
coming in?
I'm not really sure what I'll be jumping onto next. I am always reading a lot of different neuroscience papers. I'm especially interested in the sense of neural synchrony right now, but I'm not quite sure what I'll be working on next.
All right. Well, at this point, I would ask if you want to tell our viewers where they can find you online, where they can find the rest of your work, and anything else you'd like to plug and tell people where they can find something.
I actually don't do a lot of social media, so there's nothing to follow, but you can read me around in various magazines. I'd love to write more for Nautilus, in the coming months, as well as in Quanta and other places.
Fantastic. I'm sure you will. All right. Thanks so much, Elena, for taking the time to talk about your story.
Thank you. It was great to talk.